It's been dubbed Canada's most boring city, but that's just not true. And I can show you a bunch of fun things to do, see, and eat in Ottawa. First, I'm going to briefly touch on the city layout and some transportation options. Then we'll get into some places to eat and drink. Then I'll cover things to do, and throughout the video, I'll show you some ways to save money on your visit. I've added chapter markers as well, so you can skip around to different sections that interest you. As a visitor to the nation's capital, you'll likely be spending most of your time in the center of the city, which is very walkable in my opinion. Plus you have easy to use and accessible modes of transportation that will get you from one side of the city to the other in just a few minutes. If you decide to drive, the traffic isn't that bad, especially if you're used to the congestion of bigger cities like Toronto. We took the water taxi to get around to a few different places, and I highly recommend doing this. Not only is it a fun way to get across town, but the views of Ottawa and Gatineau from the boat are pretty great. The boats are fully solar with electric motors, so they're clean, efficient, and very quiet. The water taxi makes 3 stops, plus 1 additional stop further downriver at the NCC River House for an additional cost. You can also book a single trip for less than $10. We weren't planning on going to the River House, so we elected for the standard hop-on, hop-off ticket. With the hop-on, hop-off ticket, the water taxi makes scheduled stops at the Canadian Museum of History, Richmond Landing, and Rideau Canal locks. Ottawa's light rail transit system was a super fast and efficient way to get around town. They have just one line operating currently, which runs east-west through Ottawa's downtown. There will be a north-south line that connects to the airport, but I believe that's still in the testing phases. When you purchase tickets at the station, you can select anywhere from a single ride up to multi-day passes, which allows you to hop on and off. They also have Presto, so if you're from the Greater Toronto area, you can just tap on as usual. If you're going to stay at a downtown hotel and park your car at the hotel, leave it there and take the OLRT. It's going to be much cheaper than paying for the nightly parking at your hotel and paying for parking around the city. The transit options won't cover you for everything on this list, and you'll need to drive or Uber to a couple spots. Ottawa is also a very bike-friendly city, and there are miles and miles of bike lanes and scenic trails. Hey, I'm Mark. I'm a photographer and videographer based in the Toronto area, and I make videos about North American places and experiences. And with every video, I do my best to bring you great visuals and great information about the places I visit. My goal is to provide you with valuable content that helps you plan your own visit, or gives you a better insight into what a particular place or experience is really like. If that's interesting to you, then please subscribe and join me. And if you've already done that, I really appreciate you and thank you. First up is the Brig Pub, which is just across the street from the Ottawa sign in the Byward Market area. At first glance, this looks like any old pub, but the patio is one of the coolest in the city. At the back of the restaurant, outside in the alleyway, is where you'll find this intimate and urban patio. Surrounded by old brick buildings, piping, and turn-of-the-century fire escapes, the patio is set back from the road and quiet. Yet it still feels connected to the city and streets. The food options were kind of like typical pub fare, but it was delicious food, and they had pogo sticks for kids, which was super fun, and I was secretly jealous. The Mill Street Brew Pub is a great spot to eat on the west side of downtown in the LeBreton Flats neighborhood. It's located just a short walk from the Canadian War Museum, and there's also this cool bridge with views of these waterfalls that I can't pronounce. This whole area was under construction when we went, but it looks like it will be a cool neighborhood to check out once it's all finished. Mill Street is located inside the historic Thompson Perkins Mill, and the area has a history of breweries and distilleries dating back over 100 years. We had lunch here and the food was great. If you can, try and get a table on the patio or in the room overlooking the Ottawa River and Bronson Channel. There's obviously going to be lots of great places to get coffee throughout the city, but you'll likely end up at Byward Market at some point, so check out Byward Cafe. The iced coffee was great. Located above the Rideau Falls and overlooking the Ottawa River is the Tavern On The Falls. This is one of the most stunning patios in the city to get a drink. With plenty of shade and an amazing breeze blowing in off the river, this place is a perfect spot on a sunny afternoon to relax and get off your feet. Try the frozen pina colada. You won't be disappointed. Another beautiful patio and one of the best in the city is La Terrasse, located in the famous Chateau Laurier Hotel. With views overlooking the Rideau Canal and the Parliament buildings, this is a quintessential downtown Ottawa experience. At first glance, the menu may seem pricey, but the hack is to order pizzas. One pizza should feed 2 people, and after all is said and done, you've eaten at a world-class Fairmont property, but without having to pay Fairmont prices. Just keep an eye on the weather, as not all the tables are under umbrellas or awnings. Located just steps from the Parliament Building and Rideau Canal is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. In May 2000, the remains of an unidentified Canadian soldier killed during World War I were repatriated from France and buried here at the National War Memorial. There are 2 soldiers who guard the tomb, and if you time it right, you can see the changing of the guard ceremony or see the soldiers do their ceremonial patrol. From the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, walk across the street to the Flags of Canada. Then, down the stairs to Canal Lane, which will lead you under a couple of bridges and out to the first few locks of the Rideau Canal. This is a beautiful location and a great place to kick off your time in Ottawa. Designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, this 19th century slackwater canal is the only one in North America that is still operating with most of its original structure. There's a ton of great scenery along the locks and out towards the Ottawa River and Alexandra Bridge. There's great architecture here too, with Chateau Laurier on one side and the Parliament buildings on the other. And you can actually walk back and forth across the locks, which is pretty fun. The Bytown Museum is located here, but we didn't have time to visit on this trip. This is also the location of one of the water taxi docks. For over a century, this iconic hotel has hosted world leaders, royalty, and movie stars. And you don't need to stay here to experience this hotel. You can eat at one of the restaurants and step inside the lobby to explore some of the grand architecture. Plus, helpful tip if you're visiting during the summer, there's a water bottle refill station just off the lobby to the right. A trip to Ottawa wouldn't be complete without stopping at Parliament Hill. This place has been under construction for years, so expect to see cranes and scaffolding when you visit too. The grounds and architecture are beautiful and makes for a nice walk. There's no shade really, so going in the evening might be a good idea during the summer. The grounds are made up of the main Parliament building with the iconic Peace Tower and clock. The East Block is where the Senators' offices are, and across the lawn is the House of Commons. The centerpiece of the property is the Centennial Flame, which was dedicated in 1967 to commemorate Canada's 100th anniversary of Confederation. If you walk behind the Parliament buildings, you'll come across several different lookouts which provide stunning views of the Ottawa River and surrounding capital region. This is a great spot for sunset. Majors Hill Park is the oldest park in Ottawa. Established in 1826 when construction began on the Rideau Canal, this mature and beautifully manicured park provides great views of Ottawa, the river and locks, Parliament, and the surrounding area. In 1867, this park hosted the country's first Canada Day celebrations, with bonfires and fireworks. It's a great spot for a picnic or just a walk, as it's only a couple minutes from downtown, Chateau Laurier and the Parliament buildings, and it's also just a couple minutes from the next place on this list, the historic Alexandra Bridge. Completed in 1901, connecting Ontario and Quebec, this was once a railway bridge and then turned into a bridge for vehicles. But for the time being, it's a pedestrian and cycling bridge. Like a lot of things in Ottawa, it's undergoing some major construction that will take years to complete. However, it's still a great experience walking across the historic bridge, and you'll get great views up and down the Ottawa River. Today it's known as the Byward Market, but for hundreds of years prior, this general area has been home to many different variations of markets. The current building was constructed in 1926, and inside you'll find all kinds of different shops, eateries, and cafes. The area immediately outside the market is pretty touristy, and you'll find a colorful cast of characters. The whole neighborhood is pretty lively with lots of patios and little grab-and-go spots like the Beaver Tails stand. Definitely worth checking out, but keep in mind it's very busy with tourists, so expect some of the trappings that come with that kind of place, and don't be surprised if you get approached and asked for money. Next to the Tavern on the Falls is the beautiful Rideau Falls, which flow into the Ottawa River. You can stroll across the top of the dam and take in the scenic views and see a couple of war memorials. Head back towards the French Embassy and then continue walking along Sussex Drive for 5 minutes to the official residence of the Prime Minister. There isn't a lot to see here, but you can walk past the front gates and see the Queen Elizabeth II Equestrian Monument. From the monument, you can walk up Rideau Gate for about 2 minutes and reach the Rideau Hall grounds, which are open to the public. On the property, you'll find a visitor center, beautiful gardens, and the official residence of the Governor General of Canada. A great way to save money on your trip is to go on the Ottawa Tourism Board and pick a package that suits your itinerary. We chose the 3-day Ottawa Museum Pass, which gave us access to 10 museums. It cost us around $50 per person because they had a sale on, but normally it's about $80, and that's still a good savings. Once you pay for the pass, you'll get an email with a link. Make sure you only activate your ticket once you're actually at the museum, because the ticket is activated for 10 minutes only. After the 10 minutes, your ticket becomes inactive and you have to go to like customer service or something to sort it out. Also, once you activate your first ticket, that's when your 3-day pass begins. Home to some of the most important Indigenous, Canadian, and European art in the country, the National Gallery of Canada is a unique and fascinating experience. The gallery itself is pretty stark and severe. It feels like you're walking through the set of like Blade Runner or Dune. For me, the experience is as much about the exhibits as it is about exploring the cavernous spaces, passageways, and thresholds throughout the gallery. You'll find works of art by many of the world's finest artists throughout history. They also have a beautiful atrium and quiet reflecting pool. There's a couple different places in the museum also where they have arts and crafts for kids. The whole place has a strange, futuristic vibe, which I enjoyed just as much as the art on the walls. At the back of the gallery, you'll find a nice cafe with huge picture windows and some decent food options. At the other end of the Alexandra Bridge in Gatineau, Quebec, is the Canadian Museum of History. Established back in 1856, it's one of Canada's oldest public institutions. The museum sits right on the banks of the Ottawa River, and it's an icon of the Capital Region's skyline. With incredible architecture and grounds, this is a spectacular museum to walk through. You could easily spend a whole day here, as there's tons to see. The museum covers 20,000 years of human history and spans 4 levels, packed with incredible artifacts and a lot of reading. Within the complex, there are 2 cafes, one small cafe off the main lobby and the Panorama Cafe on the lower level, with a great patio overlooking the Ottawa River, the Parliament buildings, and the Alexandra Bridge. Also off the lobby is the best children's museum I've ever seen. I usually drag my heels when we have to spend time at these places, but this one was awesome and I found myself actually having fun walking through all the different buildings and streets. To start your museum tour from the main lobby, head left towards the Grand Hall. And it is definitely a grand hall, with a 6-story window wall on one side and totem poles from the Pacific coast on the other. The Grand Hall is an awe-inspiring space. The museum was designed by Douglas Cardinal, a Canadian architect based in Ottawa. His Indigenous and European heritage have been major influences in his work. Off the Grand Hall is the First Peoples of the Northwest Coast and the First Peoples Hall. First Peoples of the Northwest Coast showcases the amazing culture, both past and present, of the Indigenous people who live on Canada's Pacific coast. First Peoples Hall showcases the diversity and richness of Canada's Aboriginal culture. There's thousands of artifacts here and exhibits highlighting the myths and traditions of Canada's First Peoples, the Métis, and the Inuit communities. Back on the main lobby level is where you'll find the museum's special exhibitions. Currently, they have an incredible exhibit running called First Royals of Europe, which looks at the origins of royalty. The exhibit explores how Europeans first started smelting and were able to make weaponry and armor and could then build armies and power. Thousands of artifacts from across Europe have been curated from many different museums to create a fascinating look at how we ended up with kings, queens, and royal families. If you're able, take the stairs up to the 3rd and 4th levels for an in-depth walkthrough of Canadian history. Learn about Canada's major events, influential people, and historical artifacts as you wind your way through Canadian history up to the present day. The Diefenbunker was one of my favorite things to do on this trip. This place is literally a time capsule and takes visitors back to the height of the Cold War when nuclear war was a real threat. So real, in fact, the Canadian government built a 4-story underground bunker to house up to 500 government officials. At the time of its construction, John Diefenbunker was the Prime Minister of Canada, and that's how it got its name, the Diefenbunker. Now decommissioned, the once fallout shelter is a fascinating museum and piece of Canadian history. The sheer volume of artifacts and antique equipment throughout is stunning. As you walk through the maze of rooms and hallways, the reality of living down there starts to feel daunting. The day we visited, it was pouring rain as the remnants of Hurricane Beryl passed over Ottawa. But inside the bunker, you're so cut off from the outside world that you have no clue what's happening outside. Even in a windowless room on the surface, you may pick up hints of a storm outside with the sound of rain on the roof or somebody opening a door. But in the bunker, time just stands still. The lighting never dims or brightens. There's no sense of the day passing by. The bunker complex is designed to support life for 30 days. If I had to spend that much time down there, I think I would go insane. It's a fascinating place and a must-do when visiting Ottawa. They don't have any food here, so you'll have to pack a lunch, or you can stop in the town of Carp, which is just a couple minutes down the road. It's actually a really nice looking town. They got restaurants along the main street. The Canadian War Museum is one of the most fascinating museums in Ottawa and a world-renowned leader in the study of global conflict. The museum dates back to 1880 and has occupied its current building since 2005. The building was designed by architect Raymond Moriyama and is packed full of meaning and messages about the destruction of war and how the earth regenerates after. Inside the lobby is an amazing space called Memorial Hall. It's kind of easy to miss, and I didn't see anyone else go in while we were in the lobby, but it's definitely worth walking through. This space is here to commemorate those soldiers buried in grave sites overseas. Each year, on Remembrance Day, at exactly 11 a.m., the daylight will shine through the window in Memorial Hall and light up the gravestone on the far wall. I would imagine that this would be a very memorable and emotional thing to see. Off the lobby is a nice cafe with a full menu. The exhibit spaces are mostly on one floor, and you'll find yourself twisting and turning down these passageways as you learn about Canada's military history from the earliest battles right up to today. On the museum's lower level is an impressive collection of military jets, tanks, and equipment that the Canadian military has used over the years. The plaques in front of the equipment and weaponry tell interesting stories of individuals associated with those artifacts, as well as providing a deeper understanding of how important these machines are to the defense of Canada. Tucked away at the back of the gallery is the Moriama Regeneration Hall, which presents replicas of the statues at the Vimy Memorial in France. If you look out the sliver of window, you'll see the Peace Tower on Parliament Hill perfectly framed up. Built in 1912, the Canadian Museum of Nature resides inside the first purpose-built museum building in Canada. It's a spectacular building with this amazing modern glass atrium above the main entrance. This National Historic Site is comprised of 5 floors. On level 1, you'll find an impressive collection of dinosaur fossils and exhibits. Level 2 is home to mammals and marine life. There's a hands-on experience here too. On level 3 is where you'll find a special exhibition space, the birds exhibit, and the interactive Earth section. At the very top of the building is where you'll find an interesting exhibit about the Arctic. As you make your way up to each level, you'll get great views of the museum lobby. Make sure to stop in at the Queen's Lantern, which is the massive glass atrium above the entrance. It was dedicated to Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth, who visited in 2010. The architecture, which is very modern and filled with natural light, offers a juxtaposition to the Scottish baronial style of the original castle-like building. If you head downstairs to the lower level, there's a really fun exhibit featuring living bugs from all over the world. This is a permanent exhibition, but there's also a temporary bug exhibit on the top floor, but that's a separately ticketed event. Off the main lobby is a really nice cafe with some good meal choices by the looks of it. The Canadian Science and Technology Museum was completely overhauled in 2017 and features 80,000 square feet of exhibit space, and it's all on one floor. They have tons of interesting exhibits with cool artifacts on display. Wearable tech, sound by design, artifact alley, and my favorite section, STEAM, a world in motion, are some of the permanent exhibits. They also have fun temporary exhibits like Oh Crap, Rethinking Human Waste. There's lots of interactive stuff here for kids, and this place is definitely the most kid-friendly museum that we went to. The day we visited, I think every single day camp in Ottawa was there, and it was a complete zoo. But by 2 p.m., most of them had left, so if you want a quieter experience, maybe consider calling ahead to see if they have camps visiting, or just go later in the afternoon. There's no food offered at this museum, so if you're bringing kids, plan accordingly. Located on an old military airbase, the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum features 130 aircrafts and artifacts. Some of these include pieces of the famous Avro Arrow, the original Canada arm used on the Endeavour space shuttle, as well as some really cool antique turn-of-the-century airplanes from World War I and earlier. The museum's exhibits and sections focus on Canadian aviation, but within a global context. Plus, there's 2 different planes that you can sit in, which is always fun. One is a Soviet-era MiG, and the other is the airplane used by the Canadian snowbirds. There's a great gift shop here at the museum that's also worth taking a look at. Plus there's a cafe just off the exhibit space. Not a huge selection here, but they do have coffee. There's lots that you can see and do and eat in Ottawa, and it's definitely not a boring city. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If you're a local or you've been to Ottawa and I left something off that you think people should know about, then please leave a comment below. Anyway, that's all I got for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.